All right. Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I am your host for today, Sean Engel. You can find me on social media platforms at SeanE247. That's on many different platforms, whether it's on X or just other places in general. I know there's a few different social media platforms. I don't remember them all, but that's where generally the name you could find me under. But anyway, this is the Race Guru Thunder Hour. So welcome one, welcome all to the Race Guru Thunder Hour for 2025. Well, it's almost the end of the 2025 season as it stands, but we still got a little more racing action to go through with our podcast for this year. Before I get into everything, let me just remind people that are new to the podcast that this podcast is a production from fantasyguru.com. And they cover many different sports over there in terms of DFS, betting, and fantasy sports. So you can go over there, you can get the NFL packages, you can get the guide right here, right now, and get ready for the rest of the season. I know there's some promotions going on over at fantasyguru.com in order to get NFL content at a discount. So you may want to go over there and capitalize on that as it stands. Also available, you got the MVP, Platinum, VIP, or all-in packages. These are different packages that allow you to get multiple sports all in one bundle, or every sport even in one bundle under one nice price. Now, the NBA tipped off this week as it stands, so I do recommend getting those packages to get coverage for that, and as well as NHL, which also started up more recently as well. So the teams over at fantasyguru.com, they're getting revved up and ready to go, as am I right here with the Race Guru Thunder Hour covering some NASCAR right here to end the season. So normally, I usually do this show with Rich Mileto and Mark Hogan. Unfortunately, due to circumstances outside of the podcast right here, both of them are not going to be with me today. And also, I'm not going to have any guests either. That's right. I'm flying solo today. So you could say I'm like a single car team, like Hayek Motorsports with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. There aren't many single car teams. I know there's Hayek, there's Haas Factory Team. Yeah, only just a few in the Cup Series as it stands, but hey, we're going to make it work here. So what's going to happen on the show tonight is we're going to be going forth and recapping some of the action from Talladega, going to go through some news, give a little preview for this weekend's slate of races at Martinsville, and then just put it all in a nice little bow and go forth and get it all done. So that's that right there. And one more thing to mention, in case you haven't, if you want to get the best possible deal for any of those Fantasy Guru packages I mentioned earlier, you can go forth and hit up support at fantasyguru.com. They'll get you the best possible deal. You be nice to them, they'll be nice to you. So go forth and get that done. Send them a nice note. They'll hook you up. Oh, and also be sure to also like, subscribe, leave comments. Let me know how I'm doing, how I'm holding up the fort here solo as it stands for this week's Thunder Hour. Like to hear from you. Be sure to also reach out to me on Discord if you're in the Fantasy Guru Discord server. You can find me there, as well as the other two NASCAR experts, Rich Mileto and Mark Hogan, right there in case you want to reach them for any betting and DFS questions. They will be there this weekend in order to help cover the races as well as myself and yours truly. But enough of the getting things set up for the show. Let's actually get into the show right here. Let's go forth and talk a little Talladega. So at Talladega, there were 3 races that happened over the course of the past weekend. There was the Truck Series race, there was the Xfinity Series race, and then there was the Cup Series race. Truck Series race was interesting because we ended up having a first-time winner over there with Gio Ruggiero for Tricon Garage. He got his first win of his Truck Series career, getting it done in style through the final few laps, holding off his teammate Corey Heim. And what can we say about Corey Heim? We've mentioned his name so many times over the course of this Truck Series season. He is having a historic season after all, but it was great to see a new first-time winner there with Gio Ruggiero. He ended up leading the most laps with 37 led, and he finished ahead of Heim and finished ahead of a few other drivers there too. Ty Majeski, Dawson Sutton, Lane Riggs. That rounded out the top 5 right there. There were a couple of drivers that did end up getting eliminated through wrecks as it stands, but that's typical Talladega for you. You usually see a lot of drivers end up leading laps over the course of the run. You see a bunch of drivers make some moves that may or may not work out. And for some names, unfortunately, like Daniel Hemrick, for example, it did not work out too well for him. So it just is like pulling a lever and you see what comes up. And as long as you're there at the end, you have a chance. That's where Gio Ruggiero ended up capitalizing. So he ends up getting his first win. It's a shame, though, to see that the broadcast did not show his full burnout in celebration right at the front stretch right there, because the broadcast was cutting in and out through commercial and coming away, and they just wanted to wrap that broadcast up quick. It was clear, so just unfortunate, but hopefully this is not the last we've seen. Gio ended up going out and competing for victories, because I'm sure he's going to end up competing for more over the course of his career as it stands. And interesting to note there that this was the first win for Tricon Garage that isn't from Corey Heim. And I believe it's either a very long time or the very first time in the organization's history that somebody not named Corey Heim or not a part-timer ends up getting a victory for them. So good on Tricon for this week. They got the 1-2 finish there with Ruggiero and Heim. Now on to the Xfinity Series race. This ended up being another race where you ended up seeing a variety of lap leaders, but you did also see quite a few drivers get involved in crashes or taking themselves out. There was a few different incidents. There was one earlier on that took out multiple cars. There's one in the middle. And then towards the end there, you did have one more wreck there with Almirola and Daniel Dye. I know one of the bigger wrecks that happened was the one on lap 44 between the Toyota drivers of Dean Thompson and Connor Mozak, who drove a Chevy for Viking Motorsports, and William Sawalich. More on him a little later in the show, because there is some other points to mention with Sawalich, the driver, the number 18. But really what it came down to, though, was that Chevy ended up being king in the Xfinity Series race. Chevy took the top 12 positions, which is absolutely crazy to me when you look forward at the different names there. Counting down from 12th, you got Garrett Smithley and Nick Lights, the two SS Green Light racing drivers right there in 11th and 12th. Then the top 10 drivers end up being Jesse Love in 10th, Sammy Smith in 9th, Leland Honeyman in 8th, Parker Retzlaff in 7th, Blaine Perkins finishing in 6th, Cesar Beccarella, I believe he got his first ever top 5 finish in that Alpha Prime Racing number 5 car, Christian Eckes in 4th, Justin Allgaier with another really strong run in 3rd place, and JRM's Carson Quapple, man, he really made a run for it. He was so close to getting his first career Xfinity victory, but fell just short towards the name that you usually expect to see win and dominate on these types of tracks with Austin Hill. He led almost half the laps, 48 of them to be exact. Started from the 5th position, but he came through late in order to get another one done on the drafting tracks. Austin Hill, what's there to be said that hasn't been said? Him and RCR, they just have the drafting tracks completely figured out. Still ends up extending his record of most wins all time in the Xfinity Series at drafting tracks. It was a little amusing to see him give see the fans show their displeasure for him, and then Austin Hill himself showing some little displeasure back right at them. So pretty interesting to see that come out to play as well when he was celebrating over on the front stretch as it is getting that victory. But that's going to really do it. There isn't much to say about the Xfinity race after that other than that. It was a little competitive, different drivers leading a few laps at a time, but Austin Hill was just dominating a good amount of that race. Now for the Cup Series race, this one I felt like there was a lot going on within this particular race. You saw a lot of different lead changes go on in this particular Cup Series race. But in the end, it ended up being Chase Briscoe getting it done and getting the victory over at Talladega Superspeedway, his first drafting track victory in the Cup Series. And this win ended up taking him right into the championship round of the playoffs as it is and locked him in. Win and you're in. That's the system we're still under. He started on the front row from the second position, led 16 laps for the day, but he was not the driver that ended up leading the most laps. That ended up being Joey Logano, who late on in this race, Logano and his teammate Ryan Blaney, they looked like they were in position in order to compete for the victory right there towards the end, but they just were never able to get a proper good run going. And then they've got shuffled back, and those Penske cars, they couldn't really make their way up through the pack. Logano fell through the 20s, but then ended up working his way back to 16th by the end of the race, but still was not even anywhere close towards being in front of the picture towards winning this exact race over there. Same could be said for Ryan Blaney. As mentioned, he just did not have the right moves in him in order to work his way to the front. Hendrick Motorsports was another big storyline from this race right there too, because you had Kyle Larson in position in order to compete for the win right at the very end there. Both him and William Byron just in position in order to compete for the win as it stands, but Larson, he ended up running out of fuel on the final lap. He dropped back, ended up finishing in the 26th position as a result. He still had a pretty strong points day and is in pretty good position to lock himself into the championship round of the playoffs as it stands. But he's got to make sure that there's no new winner in order to assure that from happening. As for William Byron, he was still in the hunt right there towards the end, but got turned around coming to the line at the very end of the last lap right there. Sent him from what was going to be perhaps a top 5 finish all the way down towards the 25th position. So a loss of about 20 positions or so. That was big right there for Willie B as it stands in that number 24 team. Now he's behind the 8 ball again, and just 2 races in a row where circumstances just did not go right for William Byron and ended up getting involved in some sort of incident there. You think of Las Vegas where he got into Ty Dillon. They both wrecked out of the race. And then you think this race, Byron was competing for the win, heading for a top 5 finish, just spun out on the last lap. He's just had the worst luck through this round as it is. Will it turn around at Martinsville? Who knows? But he's not the driver I have the most confidence in. He just has not had the luck factor go his way. Now, as far as other finishers are concerned, we have a few interesting names in the top 10. You have Zane Smith finishing in the 9th position right there, which was pretty interesting as it stood. Cole Custer ended up getting a surprising 5th place result right there. Good job for the number 41. And we also saw Ty Gibbs in 3rd. He ended up in 3rd position there. Bubba Wallace ended up 4th. Wallace looked like he had the car in order to maybe steal away a win from Briscoe right there at the end, but just could not get the run to help him. But Ty Gibbs, he was able to get the proper run in order to help Briscoe end up staying ahead towards the very end of this race right there and just get away from the field. Also, shout out to Shane Van Gisbergen finishing in the 11th spot. He's actually been coming up with a few solid runs more recently in the Cup Series right here, and he almost finished in the top 10 again. So bravo for SVG right there. All 3 of the Trackhouse cars, they finished 11th through 13th. Very interesting to note as it stands. But really overall, it was a good day for Toyota in this Talladega race. They got positions first, third, fourth, seventh with Tyler Reddick, and eighth with Christopher Bell. So you have what, counting it up here, about 5 Toyotas finishing inside the top 10. Only one Chevy inside the top 10 as it is for this Cup race, and that being the 77 of Carson Hocevar. Carson ended up having a pretty decent and solid race right there. Good finish for him at the end as it stands. So that's pretty much recapping a little bit of what happened there. Like the other two races, there were a few wrecks. Not really too many big scale ones. There was just the one earlier in lap 51 that ended up taking out of multiple drivers right there, including Chase Elliott being the biggest name from that wreck. That now at this point, Elliott has to think that he's going to have to win this race in order to advance through the playoffs. There is no question about that one right there. Justin Haley, AJ Allmendinger, Noah Gragson, those are some other names taken out from that incident as it stands right there. Then there's just some drivers that just did not have the best of luck right there. Alex Bowman being another one. Chris Buescher. Man, I expected a little bit more out of Buescher, but he just cannot get it done. He went through some problems. Not a good day overall for that number 17 driver. Mr. Top 10, as we call him on this pod, just did not get it done. So just to talk about how we assess the week right there for this pod covering last week's race at Talladega, we only successfully called some good DFS days right there, me and Mark, when we were on the show last week. We called some good days for Chase Briscoe. I called that one. I didn't think he was going to end up winning, but I did think he was going to be a pretty strong DFS option right there that shouldn't be overlooked. As did Cole Custer, as mentioned earlier. He finished in the 5th position right there. He was one of my value options for last week, and I thought it was a little interesting to see that Custer ended up getting it done and overperformed for his salary, because his salary was really far down the ladder last week. Mark ended up calling a pretty solid day for Christopher Bell. Bell finished in the 8th position right there. That was one of Mark's top price picks for last week on this very pod. And he also mentioned Anthony Alfredo. Alfredo, he finished in the 21st position, which in the grand scheme of things, finish-wise, isn't the greatest finish, you could say, up there. But he started all the way from the 38th position and went up to 21st, which still, in terms of DFS, makes it a strong DFS performance for the part-timer, the Xfinity Series regular right there. Fast pasta, Anthony Alfredo. But as far as anything else is concerned, DFS-wise, not so good. Not so good. And the same could be said about the betting for the pod last week, because, well, nothing hit. It was a big, giant goose egg. That's very unfortunate as it is, but, well, can't always be winners, especially when you're dealing with Talladega right there, then and there, because Talladega is one of the most unpredictable tracks, and trying to call bets for this race, it's a slot machine, and you're either going to win or you're not going to win, and there's just no in between. You cannot predict it. You can try to predict it as best as you can. We can try to give you the stats and numbers, but the circumstances of the race, you just never really know. All right, so overall, I would say the Talladega races were not too bad, actually. I did kind of enjoy some moments and aspects of each of the races as it stands, and there were some thrilling finishes overall towards the very end right there. So, gotta appreciate the NASCAR weekend at Talladega. It was overall not too bad a weekend, despite there being chaos afoot. But let's get into some news stories right here. Let's talk about the big one that's out of the way right here. So this was confirmed earlier today as I was just putting this episode together. But it's official. We talked about this last week, about this being a potential thing to happen. Well, now it's official. Daniel Suarez is officially confirmed to join Spire Motorsports in 2026 in the Cup Series to drive the number 7 Chevrolet, replacing Justin Haley. Well, as Mark and I were talking about it last week, we mentioned that there's a good chance that this was going to end up happening. We know Suarez is leaving Trackhouse Racing at the end of the season, and he was looking for a new ride. This just happened to open up because Spire, they have not been very satisfied with Justin Haley's performance so far during the 2025 season. I mean, you look towards the stat line with Haley as it is, 34 races, 13 top 20 finishes, only 2 top 10 finishes the entire season, average finish of 22.6. Now, Daniel Suarez with Trackhouse Racing, for context, Haley is 31st in the driver standings. Suarez, he's 28th in the driver standings, so he's been a little bit better than Haley has this season. 17 top 20 finishes, 7 top 10 finishes, and an average finish of 20.9 through 34 races right there. So Suarez, he's been a little better. He's a bit more of a more recognizable name compared to Justin Haley. There's more of a brand behind him. And Suarez does bring funding because Freeway Insurance, they also announced alongside the Daniel Suarez announcement that they're going to be the main primary sponsor for that number 7 car at Spire over next season with Daniel Suarez. So that right there is going to be the combination as it stands. Suarez in, Haley out. You got to feel for Justin Haley, though, considering the circumstances. We mentioned this on the show last week, too. But going into the season with Rodney Childers as his crew chief, and then about 7 or 8 races, the pit crew ends up getting swapped out with Kyle Larson's pit crew right there, who was underperforming at the beginning of the year. Then you had the car chief end up leaving Spire to go over to become the car chief for Joe Gibbs Racing with Ty Gibbs's team right there in the number 54. Then not long after that, Rodney Childers is fired. Rodney Childers and Spire decided to part ways right there, and Justin Haley had to get used to riding with a new crew chief with Ryan Sparks as it is. And then this is all happening within the midst that this is Haley's first season with Spire. Overall, you could argue that he really got the bad end of a bad deal right there, and you just got to feel for Haley because we don't even know where exactly he's going to be able to go next. Maybe some ride in the Xfinity or Truck Series. Maybe he'll be a part-timer with a different team. Who knows? Well, but it's not looking good for Haley, considering the amount of open rides that are available right now is not very high as it stands. But we'll see what happens, and we'll continue to see how silly season develops. But Daniel Suarez going forth into Spire, it's interesting. I'm thinking that might be a 1-year deal because Spire might have their eye on a bunch of different drivers after 2026, where there's going to be a lot of driver contracts finishing up right there. So we might see some free agents on the market. Now, Richard Childress Racing, they made an announcement over this past week. It's official now. Jim Pullman is named the new crew chief for the number 8 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet in the Cup Series next year. That's Kyle Busch's team. We've been wondering who the crew chief is going to end up being over at RCR for this team ever since it was announced that Randall Burnett will be going over to Trackhouse Racing next year in order to become the crew chief for Connor Zilich in his Cup Series rookie season as it is. Jim Pullman is a pretty interesting signing as it is. He's currently the crew chief for Justin Allgaier in the Xfinity Series in that number 7 team. And that number 7 team's been looking very good ever since he got towards the pit box right there for that team. They won a championship together in 2024 as it is, and Allgaier's looking once again like one of the favorites in order to compete for the title. He's already locked into the championship race at Phoenix as a result of getting more than enough points to lock himself into the championship for the Xfinity Series. But now we're going to see Jim Pullman move up to the Cup Series with Kyle Busch. So this is a very interesting signing. It is someone that is outside of the RCR fold. We know that RCR, they've been struggling with speed pretty much throughout most races this year. So having a crew chief with some knowledge maybe to experiment with things a little bit differently, I think is going to be interesting. But even then, Jim Pullman's been a part of RCR before. He has done some one-off races with Austin Hill in the third RCR Cup team before. So it's not like that Pullman is going to be going in completely blind, but we've seen before with some crew chiefs that as they rise up to the Cup Series from other series that they might end up having some big success. We've seen it now before with Charleston Nike being Bubba Wallace's new crew chief this year, that he's been getting some of the best results of his career so far, and could be the case here too with Jim Pullman for RCR in the number 18. Now let's get into some more Xfinity series or soon to be O'Reilly series headlines right here. Let's talk about another announcement made by Junior Motorsports. They made it official that Raja Caruth will run a partial schedule with them in the number 88 Chevrolet next year in the O'Reilly series. So it's going to be a partial schedule. Raja Caruth, he's been a Truck Series regular for the last year or two. Ended up getting a win last year, ended up getting another win this year, and he's right in the thick of the hunt in order to make the Truck Series championship for this season as it stands, and driving for Spire Motorsports currently in the Truck Series. This is pretty exciting. This is pretty cool to see Raja really get an opportunity like this with one of the top teams in the O'Reilly, soon-to-be O'Reilly Series garage. It's not going to be for the whole season. I have been hearing that Raja Caruth is apparently going to be splitting time between Junior Motorsports and Jordan Anderson Racing. Although that part of the news is not official yet, there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of discussion, and even Raja himself has kind of alluded to the fact that we may be seeing him in two different cars to run the full O'Reilly Auto Parts Series season in 2026. So real interesting to see, real cool to see Raja get the opportunity right there. But that's not the only JRM related headline that we saw this week. Not the only announcement that they've had to make. They did also end up confirming that Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen, they will be running select O'Reilly Series races for JRM next year. They're probably going to be back in the number 9 Chevrolet car, splitting that ride right there. And that's going to be real interesting to see which tracks that they end up getting selected for. I can imagine that SVG is probably going to get a bunch of the road course races because that's where his bread and butter is. That's where he's been best at. And maybe Chastain might get a few of the ovals as it is. So interesting to see. Looking forward to hearing more about this news in order to know where they're going to be placed at. So that has been confirmed as well. Next up, another Truck Series headline right here. Brendan Butterbean Queen. He's the first driver that's been officially named to join Ram with Kaulig Racing in the Truck Series for next year. Now the ARCA Series champ right there, Butterbean, he's got an opportunity right there in order to have some nice long-term development with Kaulig Racing. He's the first driver that's being named for Ram, so I can imagine that they're going to really spend a lot of time with him and perhaps maybe make him one of the potential drivers in order to anchor Ram or Stellantis's or Dodge's return to the Cup Series, because they are planning it in order to go Cup racing by maybe 2027 at the earliest as it is. So we do not know the full plan for that, but it is going to be very interesting to see how Butterbean does in his first full-time Truck Series season next year. He's already made some part-time starts before in the Truck Series this year, but now we're going to see him with Ram. Very excited to see who the rest of that Ram lineup is, because they mentioned that the Kaulig Racing will have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 trucks for that team running with Ram during the next year. So we shall see who the rest of that lineup is, but it's going to be pretty intriguing. Next up, a headline right here that will affect the race this week right here. It is now official that William Sawalich, I mentioned him earlier in reference towards that wreck that he had at Talladega. He is going to be out from this week's Xfinity Series race due to concussion-like symptoms. That is rough right there. I know he took a hard hit within that crash, but although he took a trip to the hospital, he was released from the hospital. Doctors did not clear him in order to race in this week's race. Instead, it will be Justin Bonsignor in the number 18 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota in the Xfinity Series in place of Sawalich this week, as he still is going to be awaiting recovery. As far as Sawalich is concerned, concussion-like symptoms is very rough to deal with. So that could range from any kind of timeout, but if anything at this rate, considering the point of the season that the Xfinity Series is at, I'm starting to I'm pretty sure that he's not going to be back running any more races this season, which is just unfortunate because William Sawalich, even though he had a slow start towards this season, this second half of the year for William Sawalich has ended up being better for him in the results column, and he's finally been showing some of that promise that he had racing in the ARCA series. So, unfortunate for him. It just sucks, but yeah, it's just also a reminder, too, that the racing is not exactly a sport, one of the safest sports out there, and there still always runs the risk of injury being at play. So, yeah, sometimes we forget about that, but that is the case right here, and this is just a grim reminder of that as it stands. All right, but that's enough news that we'll be covering for this week's race. All right, so Martinsville right here. Let's preview some Martinsville. We're returning to the paperclip. They call the track that because the way the track is shaped is very similar to a paperclip as it is. But we're going short track racing once again. It'll be all three series in play once again, Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. It's going to be pretty interesting to see because for all three of these series, this is an elimination race, so the playoff stakes are going to be ramped up as it stands right here. Let's go over and quickly evaluate the situation for the playoffs for all three series. Now, for the Truck Series, it's pretty interesting as it stands because we have only one driver that's locked into the championship round. That's Corey Heim, as it is. Then you have Rajat Caruth in second right now. He has a 14-point advantage over the cut line. Then you have Tyler Ankrum and Caden Honeycutt, both on the plus side of things as well. Then below the cut line, you have Ty Majeski and Lane Riggs. Both of those drivers could still realistically point their way in because Majeski's only 5 behind, Riggs is only 6 behind. But then you have Daniel Hemrick and Grant Enfinger. Those two drivers are thinking you might need in order to win in order to get into the championship race at Phoenix. So I expect those two in order to probably make some moves to gun for the win as it is. But considering how strong some of these drivers have been on the short tracks, though, that's going to be a tall order right there between Corey Heim and Lane Riggs. Even though he's behind the cut line, he's always a favorite when it comes to the short track races because he always displays a lot of speed right there on these particular types of tracks. And don't underestimate Ty Majeski either. It's going to be pretty intense for the trucks as it is to lock in those final few spots. Now, for the Xfinity Series, it's a little bit more like, as it stands, not as competitive for the final few spots. Connor Zilisch and Justin Allgaier, you could say they're pretty much locked in. Plus 83 for Zilisch, plus 76 for Allgaier. Then you have Jesse Love in third with a 40-point advantage. Love has got a pretty great shot of making it in, even if there is a new winner. He's got a pretty solid advantage over Carson Kvapil, who holds the last spot in the playoffs for the Xfinity Series with plus 11 over Sammy Smith. Now, Sammy Smith, that's a name that we're going to have to watch, considering earlier in the season, he almost ended up winning this at Martinsville the first time around the Xfinity Series visited it. So do keep that in mind. Now, as for the other drivers right there too, Brandon Jones minus 20, Sam Mayer minus 22, Sheldon Creed minus 41. They're at least going to need a lot of stage points and maybe some help, if not to win right there between those three drivers. But it wouldn't shock me if Jones or Mayer ended up getting pretty competitive for the win as well. They've been pretty fast on this track in the past as well. So Xfinity, it's going to have some competitive elements to it. I think it's going to just come down to who's going to end up winning that race, and do keep that in mind for the playoff picture. Now, as for the Cup Series, we have two drivers currently locked in with wins, being Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin. They're into Phoenix no matter what. Then you have Christopher Bell at plus 37, Kyle Larson at plus 36. That is more than enough points to think that unless those two have a really horrible day, they're likely going to end up making it to Phoenix. But where the interesting element comes in is the fact that if a driver below the cut line ends up winning this race, then it becomes real interesting, and it becomes a really tight points battle for that final spot, because Bell and Larson coming into this race, they're only separated by exactly 1 point. And that, if you get like William Byron, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, or Chase Elliott winning, it's a simple points battle between Bell and Larson about who is going to advance into the playoffs as it is. And that ends up mattering, considering some of the names that below the cut line. We have Byron, who's won at Martinsville multiple times, Blaney, who's won the last two full Martinsville races, and then you have Chase Elliott, who also won at Martinsville in the fall before, in order to lock into the final race at Phoenix. I bring up these playoff narratives because that's really what a lot of the focus is going to be on, and it is going to affect the race scripts that these drivers and teams are going to run, and it affects their strategy there too. If you're a driver that's trying to race their way in on points, you may try to opt for a more safer approach, getting stage points and just making sure you're there at the end. But if you're one of those drivers that are below the cut line, you're thinking win, 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 do anything for the win. That could lead to some desperate moves and desperate strategies sometimes, with drivers taking a chance, and that could end up greatly affecting the DFS and betting situation for Martinsville this week in all three series. So do keep that in mind. Speaking of DFS, the ideal strategy is you want to rely on some dominators for this week's race. Races at Martinsville end up getting to the point where if you're at the front, you can get an advantage by riding clean air with clean track. This ends up making it, especially in the Cup Series, you'll have drivers out there that end up dominating whole portions of the entire race right there. So that's going to be really big, and you want to nail those dominators. Usually they're drivers that end up starting more towards the front of the pack, because Martinsville is a track where it's known for being a little trickier to pass as it is. So it favors drivers starting towards the front in order to maintain their positions starting towards the front as it is, due to the passing overall. And this is not a track where you want to go multiple laps down, because it is also very hard to recover going from a lap down unless there's a lot of wrecks going on, or you just have a car that's just that fast in order to move through the field. So do keep that in mind. Dominators are going to be key for DFS this week. You want to make sure that you get them. And then you want to make sure that you round out some drivers that end up getting a pretty solid finishing position. Even if they don't get a lot of place differential, finishing position is going to be key. If driver ends up starting in the top 20 but still ends up finishing maybe one or two spots like around 18th or so, that's still going to pay out for your DFS lineup as it stands. So do keep that in mind. Also, be sure to consider making multiple lineups with different driver combinations as per usual, because sometimes these Martinsville races could end up turning into wreckfest, especially in the lower series as well. You got drivers desperate in order to make their way towards a win to advance into the playoffs. Yeah, that's a recipe for chaos right there in order to keep in mind. So variety, getting dominators in, those are some of the things that you got to watch for, but we will be having more coverage during this week's race all throughout the week with Rich Mileto, Mark Hogan, and I all covering each of the different races. You could hit us up at Discord for strats. You could hit us up at Discord for drivers and how we feel about them, especially after practice and pre-race events. And one other big thing, especially to note for the Cup Series, is that Goodyear is debuting a new left side tire for the Cup cars this week. This is important to note because Goodyear is trying to experiment with the tire compounds and tire setups in order to have some more tire wear and perhaps encourage more passing throughout this race. 3 different drivers ended up testing for the new tire in the Cup Series so far because there was a tire test earlier in the year. That being Christopher Bell, Joey Logano, and Ross Chastain. So do keep in mind that these 3 drivers ended up having a little more track time on this very track and have some experience with the new tire and how it's expected to run. So let that be known as a little DFS tip that maybe these 3 drivers could end up showing some speed all throughout the weekend with the Cup Series. Now, getting fourth, let's go through the notables and part-timer list for all 3 series this week. We got some pretty large lists as it is right here, and normally this is where one of the other 2 co-hosts of mine end up reading at least part of the list, but I get the brunt of it to myself. How exciting. So let's go forth and read our way through the list right here. Starting in the truck series, we got Brent Cruz in the number 1 truck for Tricon Garage, Logan Bearden in the number 02 for Young's Motorsports, Clayton Green in the number 2 for Rome Brothers Racing, Norm Benning in the number 6 for his own team, Norm Benning Racing. Brett Butterbean, Brendan Queen, is in the number 7 for Spire Motorsports. After Butterbean, we have Alan Waller in the number 22 for Rome Brothers Racing. Timmy Hill is back in the number 56 for Hill Motorsports. Looking for a value DFS option, that's a name that you may want to watch right there. Casey Mears is back in the number 69 for Motorsports Business Management. Patrick Starpoli in the number 84 for Cook Racing Technologies. And Justin S. Carroll in the number 90 for Terry Carroll Motorsports. And that wraps up the truck series right there as it stands. Do think that Brent Cruz and Butterbean are probably the 2 most notable names on that list in order to keep in mind for DFS and betting purposes. Now, in the Xfinity series, we have a much larger list over here on our hands. We got Brad Perez in the number 07 for SS Greenlight Racing, Brendan Butterbean Queen. So yeah, Butterbean's doing double duty. He's driving the number 11 for Colic Racing. Garrett Smithley's in the number 14 in the other SS Greenlight Racing entry. Corey Day is back in the number 17 for Hendrick Motorsports. Justin Bonsignor, as mentioned, is in the number 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing. Eric Almirola is in the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing. So that's another big name to watch because he's won here before in this very series. Patrick Starpoli is in the number 24 for Sam Hunt Racing, so that's another name doing double duty this week. Austin Green is in the number 32 for Jordan Anderson Racing. Takuma Koga is in the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports. Josh Williams is in the number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing once again. Preston Pardis is in the number 50 for Pardis Racing Incorporated. Mason Maggio is in the number 53 for Joey Gase Motorsports. Thomas Annunziata is in the number 70 for Cope Family Racing. Myatt Snyder returns in the number 91 for DGM Racing. And then Connor Mosak is in once again in the number 99 for Viking Motorsports. So that's a lot of names right there. I do like Almirola as it is. Corey Day could be interesting. Butterbean as well. Justin Bonsignor. You got a few different names right there that do stand out among that list to keep in mind. But also note, there's 39 entries overall in the Xfinity Series race this week and only 38 spots available. So one driver is going to go home after qualifying. And as for Cup, there's only just one part-timer entered in this week, and that's Casey Mears in the number 66 for Garage 66. I'm not expecting much out of that entry right there. They are going to be definitely down on speed compared to the rest of the field as it is. Okay, before I go forth and wrap up with the picks for this week's race, the early picks, I mean, just as a reminder, off the top of the head right here, that this is a part of FantasyGuru.com. They have plenty of NFL packages, the guide, the content, all the different articles, the DFS, the Discord rooms. Got the whole team firing on all cylinders right there, helping people with DFS and betting. Go over to fantasyguru.com in order to get the best possible deal. Hit up support at fantasyguru.com. Send them an email. Let them know, hey, to hook you up, and they'll hook you right up with options including MVP, Platinum, VIP, or all-in packages. Basketball does start this week, so do keep that in mind right there, that you definitely want to get some of those packages in, especially with Fensty and the rest of the NBA crew getting ready to tip off the rest of the season as it is right here. But as far as NASCAR is concerned, there's only 2 more weeks left of the 2025 season. Let's get right on into the picks. So top price picks to watch right here. I ended up going with 4 names instead of the usual 3 right here. Starting it off, I got Ryan Blaney. He's won the last 2 fall Martinsville races. He's got to win in order to get in. He's thinking win in order to get in. Those Penske cars are usually fast during the fall Martinsville races, and Blaney, if this race gets onto a really long run, I expect him in order to have some speed. And he showcased that on some of the shorter ovals this season too, like New Hampshire, which he won earlier in the year. So do keep that in mind. I also have Chase Briscoe, the driver that ended up just winning. Historically, this has been a solid track for Chase Briscoe. And overall, 9 races, 6 top 10 finishes, average finish of 12.2. A lot to like with Chase Briscoe right there. He doesn't have as good of an average finish as Ryan Blaney, who has an average finish of 8.5 in 19 races, which is absolutely incredible. But Briscoe, especially considering where he is priced salary-wise, he can save quite a bit of salary in order to fit some of these other top drivers in. 9,200 on DraftKings, while on FanDuel, he is also at a bit of a discount there at about 10,500. So do like Briscoe quite a bit this week as well. Now, the other 2 drivers, it's one of my famous splits between different sites right here. I do like both of these drivers overall this week, though, for both DFS sites. But I'm going to emphasize one site for each right here, and that's Chase Elliott for DraftKings. Again, as mentioned, he is a former winner at Martinsville in the fall. He's only $10,000 on DraftKings, which is a pretty nice discount that you can get him. He's $12,000 on FanDuel. So he's the 5th most expensive on FanDuel, but DraftKings, he's about the 6th most expensive driver right there, but almost in that $9K range, which saves quite a bit of salary compared to like Ryan Blaney, who's at $11,200 on DraftKings. But Elliott, he's also finished top 5 in the last 3 Martinsville races. He's led multiple laps in all of them. He's going to be one to watch. And the last driver of like the top price picks that I've put down here is Denny Hamlin. I know Hamlin's already locked in, but he's going to be, he always loves racing at Martinsville. He's historically done very well at Martinsville in the past. I mean, you look towards his overall career with 39 times he's raced at Martinsville, 6 victories, 27 top 10s, average finish of 9.8, 2,722 laps led in his entire career. That's more than any other driver in the field as it is this week. So a lot to love about that number 11. This is a great track for Hamlin. He knows that basically if he ends up winning this race, it still helps Christopher Bell get into the playoffs because that's no new winner. So I expect Hamlin in order to go for it, if not try to put himself in a good position. He's done so multiple times throughout the last couple of Martinsville races with multiple top 5 finishes. In fact, 5, in fact, in the last 7. That's going to wrap it up for the top price picks to watch. Let's get to the mid-tier section. The mid-tier, honestly, it was tricky for me because this tier is going to be a little bit practice and qualifying dependent, more so than the top price tier as it stands for DFS. There's 2 drivers that I actually had my mind on quite a bit, and then picking that last driver was a tough one for me. So enough stuttering around. Let's get to it here. But I've got leading it off, I got Bubba Wallace as it stands. This is a great track for Bubba Wallace. He's only $8K on DraftKings, so pretty decent price that you can get the number 23 driver as it stands. He also has 4 top 10 finishes in the last 7 Cup races at Martinsville, with an average finish of 9.9 as it is. So Bubba's been pretty fast. He's shown some speed at times. It's the type of driver that can easily compete for a top 10 finish this week. Then I also have Austin Cindric. This was the driver that was tricky in order for me to slot into here, and I could just as very easily pivot away from Cindric as it is. But he's a part of Team Penske, and Team Penske's been pretty solid on the shorter tracks overall this season. And Cindric, he scored top 10s in the last 2 fall Martinsville races. So I do think that there's a chance that he could end up sneaking away with another decent result. And for the price, he's only $7,200 on DraftKings. Easy to fit him in right there and to consider, especially he ends up looking good in practice, and qualifying ends up putting him in a pretty nice position for DFS. Don't mind the number 2 this week. I do not mind that. And then, well, I mean, it's me on this show. What's the name that I probably said more than anybody else for either a mid-tier or value pick this season? Ryan Preece. Yeah, not shocked right here. But if you did want to really use Preece, this is an absolute great week in order to utilize him. And DraftKings and FanDuel, they still don't get the full picture with pricing him where he should be performance-wise. 7K on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. That is dirt cheap for a driver who has finished in the top 20 in all 5 of his races in the next-gen car, with 2 of those being top 10s. So overall, there's a lot to like with Ryan Preece. I know RFK Racing as a whole organization has not been the strongest at Martinsville, but if there's anybody from the 3 RFK drivers between Keselowski, Buescher, and Preece is going to be the likely top performer of the group. Historically, he's performed the best of the 3 at this track in the next-gen car, and I do think that he's also the cheapest. I do think he might have a little more rostership than the other 2. Well, maybe not, but I do think that he is a name that we have to keep an eye on. Let's talk about some sleepers and values now, shall we? Let's do it. I'm going to start off with Austin Dillon right here. And again, like the mid-tier, this is another tier of drivers where I do think that it's going to be practice and qualifying dependent, especially in the case of Austin Dillon right here, because he's a driver who sometimes has qualified pretty well at this track, but there's other times where he hasn't exactly qualified well. But either way, Austin Dillon, he's one of the drivers that in this tier has been a little bit more consistent on the shorter tracks this season than some of the other names that you would see on this tier as it stands. And he also has shown some decent results before the price at Martinsville. His last 7 races at Martinsville, he has 4 top 20 finishes, which that's a little bit better than most of the names that are going to appear in this tier. Next up that I have is Todd Gilliland. Give me some of the Todd father. he's making me an offer that I can't refuse this week because he's been really good at this track, particularly in the past. Like Austin Dillon, he has 4 top 20s in the last 7 Cup Series races, but he's also got some top 10 finishes right there, including a top 10 finish of 10th earlier in the year at Martinsville after starting in the 25th position. This is a good track for Todd Gilliland, and he's been trying to throw some decent results actually in the last couple of races overall this season. Looking back towards his stat line for the last few races, he actually has about 4 top 20 finishes in the last 5 Cup events this season, and has never finished worse than 21st in the last 5 races. He's sneaky good this week, and I like the fact that this is a good track historically for him. Even back in the Truck Series, I remember him being pretty solid at this track. Next up and rounding out my list, if you want a real bargain value, well, honestly, there's not a lot of names I really like without seeing some more data, but I do think that one name that we should keep in mind is Shane Van Gisbergen. Yeah, going with a road course race. Sometimes the road course racers end up performing pretty good at Martinsville, and SPG has done so in the past. His first Cup race at Martinsville, he ended up finishing in the 12th position. And for a driver that's 5,900 on DraftKings, that's actually, if you get a driver that's at that price and finishes that high, that's more than a victory right there too. And SPG, as mentioned earlier in the show, he's been actually putting together some solid races within the past couple of events. He won at the Charlotte Roval, but he also has 2 other finishes of 10th at Kansas, and he finished 11th at Talladega. So the last 4 races, that's 3 finishes of 11th or better for SPG. Do watch out for him this week. And that's going to round out the value sleepers and values right here. Let's talk about my DFS core 4 as it is. So I've got Ryan Blaney at 11,200 and 14,000 on FanDuel. Yeah, of course I'm going to do this again, but Ryan Preece is in the core this week with 7,000 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. Give me Todd Gilliland there in the core as well at 6,400 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. And then the last member of the core is being split right here. If it's DraftKings, I'm putting Chase Elliott in the core at 10,000. And then if it's FanDuel, I'm putting Denny Hamlin in the core at 11,500. So give me those guys right here. Now let's talk about my betting core for winners as it is. I've got Ryan Blaney at plus 400, Denny Hamlin at plus 500, Chase Elliott at plus 650. And I know I didn't mention a lot about him today, but I do also put Kyle Larson in the betting core for at plus 500 as well right there too. I do think that Larson's at least going to be in the conversation in order to score a really good finish for this week's race. He's been really good at Martinsville in the past couple of races. I do think that he's a driver that could potentially sneak into a win right here. An honorable mention because or rather consider this as a bonus pick right here. So Mark and Rich, they're not here. I'm just going to throw in one more for good measure, thinking of in the spirit of them. They'd want maybe kind of like a gut shot or some kind of smarter play, or looking for a play on that's a little bit off on odds. Give me some Chase Briscoe at plus 1,600. I do think that the odds for this are quite off right now, too. He should be a driver that's at least in the plus 1,000 range, a little bit more closer to his teammates. I know earlier in the year, he ended up finishing 9th at Martinsville, but that was before he really got a feel for his car now. And him and that 19 team, they've been firing on all cylinders, and they just, considering that this is a short track, they may want to potentially get some notes for their time in Phoenix because they're going to try to go for the championship as well this year, that number 19 team. So Chase Briscoe at 16-1. Let's go with that right there. And as for my other bets and picks, here's a few more that I'm going to rattle off here. A few top 10s. Give me Bubba Wallace at plus 110 for a top 10. Ryan Preece for a top 10 at plus 300. Austin Dillon for a potential top 10 at plus 400, and Todd Gilliland with plus 600 for a top 10. I think all of these are fairly possible, especially considering the circumstances. These drivers have gotten it done before. And really, if you're wanting to bet on these drivers in order to get a top 10 now earlier in the week while the odds are a little longer is the best time in order to bet on them. I do also have a top 5 bet here with Chase Briscoe getting a top 5 at plus 210. I like these odds quite a bit right there for Briscoe in that number 19 team. Mentioned him earlier. I'm expecting a good week out of him this week. Then I have some group winner bets here in order to round it out for today. I got DraftKings Group B winner. That's between Chase Elliott, William Byron, Joey Logano, and Chase Briscoe. I think you could do two options here. You could take Chase Elliott at plus 180 or Chase Briscoe at plus 500. So who do I like? Oh, just give me Chase. Which one? Yes. Yes to both. Yes. DraftKings Group C winner. That's between Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, Josh Berry, and Ty Gibbs. Give me Bubba Wallace to win that group at plus 250. You can do parlays between Elliott and Wallace. That'll come out at plus 880, or you can do the Briscoe-Wallace parlay between those two groups. That comes out at plus 2,000, so 20-1 odds for both Briscoe and Wallace to win their respective groups together in one bet. Now, I do have one big chicken call this week, and yeah, unsurprisingly, it is Ryan Preece. This is a short track. He comes from a short track racing background. Modifieds race here. Preece has won on this track in a modified. Has plenty of experience on this track, even just in a modified and the Cup car as it is. So his odds are at plus 7,000 in order to win this race, and also to be the top 4 at plus 2,000. I think that's not out of the question as it is right here too, especially if the Penske drivers end up disappointing and not getting it done this week. That's a plausible bet in order to make too. Well, that is going to do it for this week's Race Guru Thunder Hour. It's been a pleasure in order to be here and record another episode. Hoping to get the guys back for next week and for the finale over at Phoenix. But overall, it's fun, and hope you all enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed the information, the picks, everything. Be sure to follow me on social media platforms at SeanE247. That's SeanE247. Go forth and follow me there in case you want to keep up with the latest content right there. If you just want to chat NASCAR or anything, just go right there and do that. So it's been great to be here for the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. Good luck to everyone in all your lineups, and may the winners be yours in victory lane. Now let's do it.